In this lesson, I want to talk about data types. More specifically, how cables and JavaScript in general hold value in memory. So you may wonder, why do we need this? Well, every time you play with the number, you are actually creating what we call a variable. You are basically reserving part of your computer's memory, your RAM, and store this information. So this number here is, let's say, 10. For now, I'm saving the patch. This number 10 is stored in my computer's memory, and I will need to use it later on. We have many different types in programming, but actually very few simple basic types. And they are all basically a combination, or they build on the simple types we're going to see today. If you think about it, there's not that many ways to hold different type of information. So the first one is the number. And you remember, if I want to visualize my number, I click on it and I open the detailed pane. But what I can do is also drag the output, release it, and use this number here. So now I can see whatever number I type here, it's reflected there. So I'm only putting integers, but actually all numbers in JavaScript are floating point. So it's technically, when you only remove everything after the point, they are still in memory, basically hold as 432.000 and so forth. So these are our numbers, we know them. There's another specific, simpler type that you also may know, called a Boolean. And a Boolean is just a simple type that can be only true or false, only 1 or 0. And so here by default it's 0, and when I check here in the UI, notice that I activate and I see it as 1. And notice that these are actually the same color, because if you think about it, it's just a specific type of number, if you will, which can be only 1 or 0. Technically, in the computer, it's not represented as the same. It takes less space to hold 0 or 1 than to store a full number that can be billions of in magnitude. But for the sake of our cables programming here, these are basically almost the same. If you want to be perfectly transform a Boolean into a number, you can also convert it, bool to number, and this will actually give you now the right number type. And you may ask, why do we need a Boolean? For any type of comparison, when you say, are my values above 2, for instance, then okay, the state above 2 is either 0 or 1. So by having this kind of Boolean values, you can execute different part of the code. It's called branching and having control flows. We're going to see that in the next lesson. But just to show you, Booleans are very handy, but it's actually unlikely that you create them as is. They're more like they are created as a result of comparisons, most likely. And when you have basically options you want to toggle on and off, you can think of those as Booleans as well. Okay, so we have the two really basic, most common types. Now, another type that you may know, it's called a string, and it stands for a string of characters. So it's really text, if you think about it. And say, hello, cablers. Sorry, hello, cablers. Once again, I see the content of my string here, but nothing appears on screen. I can do the same technique when we have this number, we have also this string. So I'm dragging this cable, and then I have this string here. Okay, so now we have hello cablers, and this of course is going to be very handy to display any type of text on our page, on our patch, or also play with some data that we get from the web, and we'll see of course examples of that. But let's see, like for now our patch is a bit sad. We have basically, it's completely empty. Remember, this is the editor's area, so this is only available to us as a developer, but what people would see for now is actually completely blank. So maybe let's make something a bit more fancy, and remember, create a main loop. If we want to use the WebGL context, anything we want to display in 2 or 3D needs to have a main loop. The only exception is if you want to create a pure HTML, like you want to display something that doesn't require any kind of texture or 3D, then you don't necessarily need a main loop. But if you use Cables.gl, GL stands for graphics. I mean, originally GL it's more for Greenland, but it's a nice play on words, I would say. So we will need the main loop. So we have our main loop, and then we need to be able to display this string here. So the simplest way I know is called text mesh. And it says, check it out, draws text in 3D space using one of the font ops. And to work, this port should be, of course, connected to the main loop as always. So I'm connecting this. By default, I have a cables, but now I'm replacing cables with our own text here. I'm saving my patch, Control S. You can also click here. And on the text match, if I want, I have many options, changing the font, the scale, make it a bit smaller, and also changing the color here, for instance. So yeah, here, hello cablers. I'm saving my patch. Now, if I want to see this, this is what people see. Now I can also change the size of the patch here while I have the editor open. I can also click here to have maximize canvas. And if I press escape, I will go back to here. I can also press Control Enter to open it full screen again. Escape to go back. So this is pretty handy for us to debug and see, because sometimes maybe you have a small screen, so it doesn't really reflect how it would look in a like regular screen. But we are still in the editor. So how can we now show our beautiful, very complex visual to the world? We have basically two options. If you go here on your patch view, your patch option, drop down, you can go to view, two things, export and view page. Let's start with the view page. Open in a new window. And now you are basically with here on you have your profile, and you have this lock here because the patch is not public, but it would be the same if it was public. And you can people can actually give you comments on your patch, say, wow, what a beautiful patch. And here you can, if you want to see it full screen, you can also click there. And now notice, look at this URL, cable/p/the ID of our patch, the identification of our patch. If I click here, I see it full screen. But when I go back, pressing escape, I still go to this patch view. Now, if I click on this menu, I can also click and open in a new window. And now the URL changes to cable/view. And now this patch here is always, it takes the full width of the page, basically. So this URL you can share with everyone. If it's a public patch, you can put it on your website, you can put it on social media. This is basically a project hosted directly on the Cables website here. So it's pretty handy. You don't necessarily need to have your own website to share your work. Now, if you want to share your patch on your specific website and you don't necessarily want to have it on Cables, you can also go back here to the patch and click on export. And in the export menu, you have many options. The first one being downloading the whole content of this HTML page, because everything is HTML, what we do on the web, with the JavaScript to make it the code happen and run. And then you can, of course, host it on your own website. You can also decide to create an executable, which is basically a local way of, you download an app and the sole purpose of the app is to run your page. This is very handy, for instance, if you create installations for museums. You can host it on Netlify, which is basically a very famous website to host web pages. I'm sorry if you know Netlify, I'm simplifying here, but yeah, just to basically publish your patch or GitHub directly there. Many options, we will see them when we export our project, our final project. We will really create a cool project that encompasses all the lessons that we will see together and export this on our own private website in the end. But I want to show you all the options here. So don't forget, you are here. I can click there to see it full screen. I can also press Command Enter. When I go here, View Patch Page, I can open it in a second window. on the different patch window, or I can view it like this. It's still not very impressive, I agree, but it's interesting to show all the options we have. So this were basically the three basic data types. Of course, we also have more complex data types. All programming basically is the composition of these things, to be honest, but sometimes you need a more convenient way to access, specifically if you need to hold many things at once. So a collection of things. For instance, a collection of numbers or collection of strings. So we made let's rename this to basic types. And let's make another area here and we call it complex types. Of course, what I'm going to show you here are complex types that are built in Cables, but as you can imagine, there is a way when you program to create all the types you want, which will be some kind of a collection of these variables that holds the information. But we will also touch that when we go to the JavaScript part of the tutorial. So here, let's go back to our complex type. The bread and butter of Cables, something that you would use 99% of the time, is the array. So an array is what? It's just a collection of numbers, most likely, but technically it's a collection of anything. It could be a collection of strings. In Cables, because we work with values to do animations, to make points in 3D space, it will most likely be an array of numbers, but it could be an array of everything, and I'm going to show you the different types of array. So here by default, it's an array generator, and that says here it can generate three kinds of array. By default, the first parameter is the length of your array. And once again, you notice that we don't see really the output, sorry. But when you go on output, you have some kind of options there. You can click on the magnifying glass here and you see the array printed here. Notice that this one is the mode selection is number. So it means I'm creating 10 number and each number has the value 0. It could be 2. And if I press this again, I have only 10 2s. I can also click here to have this another viewer there, which is I don't know, depends. Sometimes it's more handy to open this one. Sometimes it's better to open the one. And I will touch on to this. I will talk about this a bit later. But we have these numbers, these strings. We also have this array so that you can see your values right away. This array table. And I think it's more handy when your array is not too big to show it like this. Well, what if now I put 1,000 values? So if I put 100 values on 1,000 values, of course, it starts to be, if you have 10,000 values, it can start to degrade the performance of your view. So something that I would also most likely recommend is called array chunk, which is simply a way to extract the values of an array. So you can say, hey, I only want to take the first 10 values, for instance. So let me demonstrate. If I go back to array, I have other modes. I can say now I want all numbers to count instead of being only the same value. Now I really want to have 1,000 values counting from 0, because everything in programming starts at 0 to 1,000. And now let's say, it could be very big, right? Imagine 1,000 numbers there. And I only want to see the number from 300 to 310. This is where my array chunk comes handy. I'm connected here and I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna begin at index 300 or 299, it really depends, because we start at 0. And I want the chunk, how many numbers I want to extract. I want to extract 20. And now I can do the same viz array. And it's the index, so including, so this one. And now I can see only the part of the array that I want, right? So it's pretty handy, this array chunk, when you have a lot of values. And you may wonder, why do I need that much values? But if you think of a geometry, or something, a complex mesh that you import, some complex 3D object, it's most likely that it would run into tens of thousands of points and triangles. So it's the numbers are quite big if you think about them in cables. When you want to display, I don't know, 100,000 points that are moving according to the beat. These are the types of number we are playing with. It's most likely like big numbers. So to be able to visualize just part of them is very, very handy. So array chunk, array of numbers. If you have a small array, because here it's basically generating an array for us, but it's not really creating from scratch. Let's say I want to put manually 3 values and create an array. Well, you have several actually ways to do this, but the simplest one I think would be, I think it's called string to array. So if I'm here, string to array here. And this one here, so it's actually conversion because I'm typing manually here. I'm typing values, you see? I'm typing any kind of values, and then I'm asking the op to execute the code and say, okay, I'm gonna separate all my values with a comma, and I'm telling, okay, I'm guaranteeing you that these are numbers, and the one now this is my output now, and as before I can visualize it here, but this is now what I wanted to touch on. This can be also strings. If I uncomment this, like uncheck numbers, notice that now as a visualization, all strings are always put in quotes or double quotes. So now the numbers that you see here are not technically numbers, they are strings. So if I go there and I write hello and anything, you know, these are not numbers anymore. So here in the visualizer, there are quotes around numbers, but technically you don't need them. It's just an artifact of the visualization. But these now are strings and not numbers anymore. So as I said before, an array can be, it's a collection. So it could be a collection of anything technically. So okay, now we have an array of string. What if you wanted to only extract part of the values here? So let me edit this again. Hello, fellow cablers. It's a word I've entered. I'm not sure it's cablers is the way to go, but let's say in this lesson you will be cablers. I want to only extract the last value. It was easy when we had numbers because we could have other strings because we could have put 3 strings. But of course, if we have 10,000, we're not going to write 10,000 ops, but maybe we want to extract only this value. So the cool thing is that we have many ops to pick values out of arrays in cables, but the most simple one would be array, get, and then I want to get what? I want to get a string, but you see you have object, texture, I'm going to talk about this a bit later, number. I know that this is an array of strings, so I can say array get string. And here I have 2 inputs, the array and the index. What is the position of the thing I want to extract? So I'm connecting my array. By default it's 0, so I will get hello. I want to get cablers, so it's the 0, 1, 2, so position index 2. And now I can start to visualize it as before. So it looks silly, but it's very important to be able to be comfortable in manipulating types, be able to pick values. And of course, if you have a get, we have a set, right? We have the other way around. If I want to replace part of my array here, I can do the same thing, array set, and they will ask you what type of things you want to set. I know it's an array of string, so I want to set a string. I'm taking back this array again, connecting there. Then at what index? Let's say the first. And what is the string I want to replace? I want to replace it with hello with 3 W's at the end. But to run it, here I need to execute. So this doesn't really replace things automatically. I need, in our case here, to click. But of course, this could be triggered by other things. And this will be the content of our next lesson about control flow. But for now, I can just click here. Now it executes, and now I visualize it there, and now I've replaced. And notice that I've also replaced, because this is actually the same array, so it has also replaced the original one. So now we know how to set things, get things. We can do exactly the same with numbers, array, get number, and set number. Any type of cables you have array, get, or set. So there are technically 2 other types which are also very important in cables. They are, I would say, the most complex one, and they come along when we manipulate data from the web. Most likely something when you want to collect data, call on another API, which is a way of talking to another website from your program, getting back some information and processing it in cables. And this type is called an object. So what is an object? Let me show you, let me demonstrate. So the best way to create, once again, to create an object from scratch is to go back to using a string, because I'm typing things and then I'm converting it to another complex type. So it's called parse object here. And they would say, okay, parse a string to a JSON object. And this is a very interesting concept because most of the web now use this format, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a convention, it's a way of writing strings so that the computer knows how to format and parse them, so to transform them into the real type and then be able to play with it. So this is not going to be a course on JSON, but it's very simple as a language. It's just you need to enclose your object in parentheses or square brackets, put all your keys between double quotes. So let's say name here, and the value is going to be Kirel. This is my name. I'm saving this object, and now when I click on parse object, first it knows, okay, this is valid JSON. I can click on the glass here to see the content of what we just typed. Simple. And I can also do a vis object, which also prints the object. So okay, for now it looks like a weird string. It's a string, like two strings, but you have this curly braces and here a column. So how do we extract valuable information here? So an object, think of it as like a dictionary. I have the name, like the word I want to look for, and on the right I have the definition. So now I can ask, what is the value associated with the name, right? So I'm basically looking for this key, and I want to get the value associated with this key. So I can do this by simply have an object get, and now I want to get a string. So object get string, and I will ask you, okay, what is the key? The key that I want to look for here is name. So if I type name, I have Kirel here. So I have the result of my object. The object doesn't need to be one single line. I will actually show you now a more complex object that I pulled from the web. First, maybe let me show you for a simple array, because an object can also be an array. Because in JavaScript, this is the crazy part, in JavaScript, everything is an object, actually. So an array is a specific type of object. So it's perfectly valid to do a parse object again here, write the JavaScript notation, the JSON notation for an array, which is simply things enclosed in square brackets. And let's say I'm writing here some values, and ask JavaScript, hey, can you parse this from JSON? So yeah, of course I can. Here is my result. And notice it's exactly the same as printing an array as before. But now, wait, you have this, the type of this is still this like pink value. It's not an array as we know them, which are, purple, like, I don't know, how do you call this color? Violet, I would say. How do you transform this to this? You have a way of saying that. It's in Cables, and it's called object to array. So object to array, and now you make it like really a conversion for us and to play in Cables visually and say, oh, I know that this object is really an array. It's not a complex object with the strings and curly braces. So now I can view this as a simple array. So this is another way, and this will be very handy when we get data from the web, because by default everything is an object and it's not technically a cables array. So we need to convert it like this. And as I said before, now let me show you a complex real-life object that will describe, for instance, someone from a record of someone in the bank. I actually took this from Wikipedia on JSON. So if you go here quickly on wiki JSON, you would have the explanation of where it comes from, how, and the syntax basically. So I took this. Now I'm pasting it in my parse object. So let me show you this. And have you noticed that it's, if you have a big string, sometimes you would like to have the editor here. I have basically space to write my object. It's not a simple string that as we had before there, right? When I want to type a string, let's say I want to type a very long one, it's a bit annoying because I don't really have space here. So in Cables, there is also something called the string editor, which is also basically included by default when you do parse object. And it's exactly the same thing, but now we have the big space, so we can write 10 lines if we want to, right? So string editor. Now, if we go back to our parse object, and I've pasted my big JSON string here, now it starts to be fun because I can extract information and maybe replace that by some info that we get from the object. So first, I'm gonna view it. And something that I mentioned before is that when you are on this JSON like object, now we also have this gear that we can click. And now we have Cables as a nice way of extracting all the fields of our object and automatically allows us to pick values. So let's say I only want to get the last name. I know that this is a string. I'm clicking on string and I will do basically the op for me. Object get string by path, which is a bit of the same as object get string, but instead of having to write directly the key, here I can have nested values. So I can, let's say, here it's this at the simple level, so it's almost the same. But let's say I want to get the address and I want to get the street address directly. The boring way would be to do this. First, I know that it's an object, so I'm gonna get object get object, because as you noticed, everything in curly brace is an object. So here I have another object within the object, and I can have as many objects that I want nested. So here I would say, okay, give me whatever is behind the address, and now I would get only the address part, right? So this street address, city, state, and postal code is now here. And now if I want to get the street address, I would, we did before, I can copy and paste this up, connect, and call this one, it's not last name, but street address. And now I would get the output. But it's a bit tedious to imagine it's very nested like this one. Look, phone number, then I know it's an array, and then in each of the values of my array is actually an object itself. So it starts to get tedious to go and make as many ops as my hierarchy of objects. So there is this cool in Cables here, when you go parse the object and you click on the gear, if I only want to get the street address, I can click here directly. And now the path would be, hey, it's in address, and now in the property of address, I want to get the street address. And this is really equivalent. So I can just remove this now. So it's cleaner, right? I don't need to have tons of sub-objects, and I can get any of the values I want. If I want now to get an array, because I want to get the phone numbers, I can do the same thing. I click here, click on the gear. I say, hey, I want to have the phone numbers, but I want to expose them as an array, because you see there's not only one phone number. If I click here, I will only get this one, but now if I click there, I will get all, if there are many of them, it will basically go in the same like recursively, basically in the same level, and take the phone number. So let me get this here, and it will create the op for me, object get array value by path. And now if I print this, I would get my phone numbers. This is what I wanted to get to replace our text here. So we'll come back to this. It's just an introduction to types. But I hope that you start to see the power of having some kind of nested data structure, because this could be anything. It could be the state of, or it could be a game, and you say, oh, I have different characters, I have my life, I have my number of coins that I have. It could be, I mean, most data visualization are like this. It could be, this is the number of inhabitants in all the European cities, and now I want to get by key with the name of the city and the value, the number of inhabitants, and maybe another property with the distribution of age, right? So how do you store and represent all of this information? Well, you would use an object like this. So to go back to our visuals, because for now it's a bit sad, what we can do is replace the text here by the phone numbers, for instance. So I'm gonna grab the main loop, I'm gonna put it there, and notice, this is, I'll show you a way to cut the cables in a future lesson, but I'm disconnecting this cable, going there again, and say, okay, now I want to take, and these are arrays, but I would like to actually have this as a string again, because now, okay, these are individual values, so I know how to get that. You know that I can click here, also clear on the gear, and get the first value as a string, connect this to my text, and now I would get the first phone number. It's a bit too big, so I'm reducing the scale. But what if I wanted to combine two things? For instance, first name and last name. Here, we know that these are two different properties. So if I go here again, I click on my gear, I say, hey, I want to get the first name. Click here again, and I want to get the last name. So this is cool, but these are two different values, but I need to combine them to have one basically text that I put there. So there is also a way, of course, to join basically strings together and from an array. And this is called array to string. But this is not an array, right? So if maybe at first I need to create an array, there's two different ways. If you just want to concatenate two strings, you can create an array and then output the array to a string. So we can use array set string for one, array set string for the other. Here it's very simple. We just want to put the two next together. So I can use something called concat. And they say, hey, join two strings together. So I can say, okay, I'm going to take the first string, and I'm going to, first name, then I'm going to concatenate with the other one. And notice that's John Smith, but there's no space between the two. Right? So it's not very funky. You want to have John space Smith. So what you could do, simple, there's another way, more complex way, but I can just do this simple concatenate. Now add a string, an empty string here, and say, first I'm going to take the first one, concatenate with an empty string, so it would be John space. And now the result of this, I'm going to concatenate it again with the last name, and I will have John space Smith. But there's also concatenate multi, so that you can do everything in one go, because imagine you have 10 strings, you're not going to create tens of concats here. So it's exactly the same thing. I'm putting my first string there, my middle one, it was going to be, I have add space here, but let's say I want to do it by I want to have any kind of character in the middle, like this one here, a pipe. And now I'm connecting this on the third input. And now I will have the final outcome of this would be John Pipe Smith, for instance, right? Or space. And if I don't want to, I can also put spaces here, because it does it automatically for me. It's such a common use case that you want this to be done for you. So it's better to just have one if you need to concatenate multiple strings. And I can even now put it there, because I know that by default, I'm going to add a string in between all the strings. And now I have a cool string that I can replace there. So if I go back here, because there's better, because the two strings were basically linked to the text. So now I made sure that I only have this one, and I'm going to change the color to something different there. So I hope this lesson was informative. I know we touched on a lot of concepts, and we're going to go back. There's a full session on arrays, because for now we didn't really do anything with them, but we'll see in the future how we use those values to put coordinates and create shapes in 3D. But I thought it was really interesting and important to show you right away all the different colors of cables. One thing is missing, it's the textures, but it will be, it's also technically an object. But it will also have a full session on this, because textures are also the bread and butter when you want to import images and create some kind of live Photoshop if you want, or you can create effects that are interactive on the fly. But this will be a full session later on. So I hope it was informative, and now that we know how to export your patch, maybe you replace by your own name and you create, you publish it online. Let me know. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.